If heartbreak had a sound, it would be the echo of my name in an empty house. If regret had a face, it would look eerily like mine staring back from the bathroom mirror at 2 a.m. The night I left Mark, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood in the doorway with my suitcase and realized how terrifying silence could be when no one is left to fill it. It had taken me 7 years to understand that love can die quietly, no explosions, no betrayals, just the slow erosion of affection until what's left feels like obligation wrapped in habit. And maybe that's why I walked away, because I couldn't stand being invisible anymore, even in my own life. 2 weeks later, I found myself teaching English at Jefferson High, a small public school in Oregon, where no one knew who I had been or what I'd lost. It was supposed to be a temporary escape, a way to rebuild. I didn't expect her. Her name was Elena Moore, the new art teacher. The first time I saw her, she was standing on a chair, trying to hang a painting above the bulletin board. Her messy bun falling apart, a pencil tucked behind her ear. The painting was a swirl of blue and orange, the kind that made you feel something you couldn't name. When she turned around and smiled at me, really smiled, like she saw me and not just a stranger, something inside my chest shifted, painfully and beautifully. "New English teacher?" she asked, her voice soft, musical. "Yeah," I managed, pretending not to notice the smudge of paint on her cheek. "And you're clearly breaking school safety regulations." She laughed, a sound that felt like sunlight after weeks of rain. That was the moment. The first spark, quiet, harmless but real. By the end of my first week, our paths kept crossing in small, almost cinematic ways. In the teacher's lounge when the coffee machine exploded. In the hallway when I dropped my papers and she knelt to help me pick them up. In the parking lot where we both stayed late grading assignments, watching the sunset melt behind the schoolyard. Elena had a way of speaking that made everything sound alive. She talked about art as if it were a language for things words couldn't hold: grief, longing, hope. I didn't tell her that I'd forgotten how to feel any of those things. She didn't ask about my past and I didn't offer it. But sometimes when our hands brushed over a shared cup of coffee, I wondered if she could sense the fracture lines beneath my skin. One rainy afternoon, I found her sitting alone in her classroom. The lights were dim, and she was sketching on a large canvas the outline of a woman standing in the rain, her eyes closed, face tilted toward the sky. "That's beautiful," I said quietly from the doorway. She looked up, startled, then smiled. "It's not finished. I can never get the expression right." "What's it supposed to be?" She hesitated, chewing on her pencil. "Freedom, I guess. Or maybe forgiveness." Her words hit harder than I expected. I walked closer, drawn in by the faint scent of paint and lavender. "Forgiveness for who?" "For myself," she said softly. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy, but honest, the kind of silence that exists only between two people who understand pain in similar shades. "Do you ever feel like you're starting over, but you don't even know who you're supposed to become?" I asked. "All the time," she admitted. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe we're supposed to build new versions of ourselves from what's left." Her eyes met mine, deep brown, steady. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until she looked away. Days turned into weeks, and our connection deepened in ways I couldn't name. It wasn't romantic, not yet, just two lonely souls orbiting each other, trying to find warmth in the same cold world. She'd bring me tea during breaks. I'd proofread her art exhibition proposal. We'd talk about books, music, our students. And yet, beneath every conversation, there was an undercurrent, subtle, electric, impossible to ignore. One Friday evening after a long week, we stayed late again. Rain pounded against the windows, the hallways empty. Elena was cleaning her brushes when she said, "You ever notice how quiet this place gets when everyone's gone?" "I like it," I replied. "It feels peaceful." "Or lonely," she said, smiling faintly. I turned to face her. "Maybe both." She looked up, meeting my eyes, and something passed between us, something fragile and trembling. Not attraction, not yet, but a recognition. The kind of recognition that says, "I see the same darkness in you that I carry in me." And for the first time in years, I didn't feel broken. I felt understood. Over the next few months, we became inseparable. Not in the obvious way, no constant messages, no grand gestures, but in the quiet presence that anchored me through the chaos. When my ex-husband sent the divorce papers, I signed them in the teacher's lounge while Elena sat beside me, saying nothing. just being there. When she lost her father unexpectedly, I held her hand during the funeral, both of us knowing that grief doesn't need to be explained. Through every heartbreak and healing, our friendship blurred the line between comfort and something deeper. Sometimes I caught myself watching her too long, memorizing the way light danced on her hair, or how she bit her lip when she was focused. Sometimes she'd look back, her gaze soft and searching, as if she was wondering the same thing I was. What are we becoming? Then came the art fair. Jefferson High had organized a charity exhibition featuring student and teacher artworks. Elena, of course, was in charge. She invited me to see her final piece before the show, a large oil painting she'd been working on for weeks but never let me see. When she finally unveiled it, I couldn't breathe. It was a portrait, two women standing in the rain, their faces half turned toward each other, expressions unreadable yet full of emotion. The colors were muted, soft, intimate. This, I whispered. Elena, it's us, she said simply. Or maybe what I think we are. You helped me find this part of myself again. I stared at her, words caught in my throat. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, she added quickly. It's just you make me feel seen. My heart ached. You too. Outside, thunder rolled quiet but steady, like the pulse of something inevitable. And for the first time since leaving my marriage, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I told myself that the painting didn't mean anything, that Elena's words, "you make me feel seen," were just the kind of thing artists said when they were caught up in their emotions. But I knew better. For days after the exhibition, I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the way she had looked at me. Eyes soft but trembling, like she was standing on the edge of something she wasn't sure she was ready to fall into. And maybe I was standing on that same edge too. The night of the art fair, the school gym glowed with warm lights and the hum of conversation. Students laughed, teachers mingled, and parents snapped pictures beside painted canvases and ceramic vases. Elena's painting stood in the center, framed by soft golden light. "Two Women in the Rain," the tag read. People loved it. They called it melancholic, intimate, raw. No one seemed to notice the quiet current beneath it, the one I felt pulling me closer every time I looked at her. When our eyes met across the crowd, she smiled nervously. I smiled back. It was a small thing, but it was enough to make my chest ache. Later that night, after the crowd had thinned and the music faded, I found her cleaning up the last of the empty cups. "You did it," I said softly, approaching. "Your students were so proud." She looked up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "We did it. You helped with the setup, remember?" I laughed. "You mean I taped 3 posters and broke 1 frame?" "Exactly," she said, smiling. Then her voice softened. "Thank you for coming. It meant a lot." Something in her tone made me pause. The gym was nearly empty now, only the soft hum of the ceiling lights and the faint echo of our footsteps. I wanted to tell her what her art had done to me, how it cracked something open that I thought had been sealed forever. But before I could, she said quietly, "Sometimes I think the people we meet are mirrors. They show us who we've been avoiding." Her eyes lifted to mine. "You're that mirror for me." And just like that, the air between us changed, fragile, trembling, alive. After that night, things became harder. We didn't talk about the painting or what it meant. But the silence between us grew heavier, filled with things neither of us dared to name. There were days she'd pass me in the hallway and our eyes would meet for just a moment too long. Days when her laughter would echo from across the courtyard, and something inside me would twist with a strange mix of joy and fear. And then there were days I avoided her altogether, terrified of what I might say if we were alone. It wasn't about desire, not really. It was about connection, about finally finding someone who understood what loneliness felt like, who didn't try to fix it, but simply sat with it. One afternoon, as autumn began to paint the trees outside in fiery shades, Elena found me sitting by the school garden after class. I was grading essays but mostly staring at nothing. "You've been avoiding me," she said softly. I looked up, startled. "No, she tilted her head, smiling faintly. "You have. It's okay. I do that too when things feel too much." I sighed, closing my notebook. "It's not you. It's me trying to figure out what this is." Her gaze dropped to her hands. "Maybe we don't have to name it." "That's not fair," I whispered. "You painted us, Elena. You made us something real before I was even ready to admit it existed." The wind rustled the leaves, scattering them around our feet. She looked up, eyes shimmering. Do you regret it? No, I said, my voice trembling. I'm just scared of what comes after. Her smile was sad. Me too. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The world felt small, just the two of us and the sound of wind in the trees. Then she reached out, hesitating, before resting her hand lightly on mine. It was such a small touch, barely there, but it sent warmth rushing through me, fierce and undeniable. And somehow, without saying another word, I knew we had crossed a line we could never uncross. The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen moments and quiet understanding. Coffee cups left at each other's desks. Notes scribbled on sticky pads. You're stronger than you think. Walks around the schoolyard after classes, where conversations drifted between laughter and silence. But with every shared look, every quiet smile, came the growing weight of what we weren't saying. The world outside our little bubble would never understand. Teachers weren't supposed to fall for each other. Divorced women weren't supposed to find solace in another woman's eyes. And yet, every time I tried to distance myself, Elena would do something, a smile, a word, a glance that pulled me right back in. One evening, she invited me to her apartment to help grade her students' art essays. I told myself it was harmless, that I could handle it. Her apartment was small but warm, filled with books, sketches, and the faint smell of cinnamon and acrylic paint. You live like an artist, I teased. I am an artist, she said, laughing as she handed me a mug of tea. Controlled chaos is part of the process. We spent hours talking about her childhood in Vermont, my failed marriage, the students we secretly rooted for. At one point, the conversation slowed. She leaned back on the couch, watching me with quiet curiosity. Do you ever miss him? She asked. Sometimes, I admitted. But not in the way people think. I miss the idea of him. The version of love I thought we had. She nodded slowly. And now, I said, setting my mug down, I'm learning that love doesn't have to fit the story I was taught. Her eyes softened. What story was that? The one where a woman's happiness depends on someone else staying. Elena smiled, the kind of smile that said she understood too well. That's not love, she whispered. That's fear. The room went still. The clock ticked softly in the background. And in that silence, everything I'd been avoiding rose to the surface, the ache, the fear, the quiet, undeniable pull between us. I wanted to tell her. To say you've become my peace, my chaos, my home. But I didn't. Instead I said, it's late. I should go. She walked me to the door, her expression unreadable. Thank you, she said quietly. For tonight. I nodded, forcing a smile. Anytime. But as I stepped out into the cool night air, I realized something terrifying. Leaving her door didn't feel like walking away. It felt like running from something I already belonged to. The first snow fell the following week. Students rushed through the hallways, tossing snowballs and laughing. The world felt softer, slower. But inside, everything between us felt sharper. Elena had grown quieter, more distant. She still smiled, still waved across the hall. But something was missing, that spark of unspoken connection that used to live in every glance. I told myself it was for the best. That maybe she'd realized what we were doing or almost doing couldn't last. But the truth was, I missed her. Desperately. Then one evening she didn't show up to class. Or the next day. The staff room whispered about it, something about her taking personal leave. Family matters, they said. I tried to focus on my students, but my thoughts kept drifting back to her. When she finally returned a week later, she looked different, pale, tired. Like she'd spent days fighting something she couldn't win. Are you okay? I asked, catching her in the hallway after class. She hesitated. Can we talk? We ended up in the art room again, the place where everything between us seemed to begin. She stood by the window, arms crossed, staring at the gray sky. My mother's sick, she said finally. I might have to move back to Vermont for a while. The words hit me like a wave. For how long? I don't know. Maybe months. Maybe longer. I swallowed hard. You're leaving. She turned, eyes glassy. I don't want to. But I can't stay here pretending nothing's happening either. I took a step closer. What do you mean? Her voice trembled. You know what I mean. Every time I see you, it feels like I'm standing on the edge of something that could destroy us both. Elena, no, she said, shaking her head. You just got your life back. And I'm barely holding mine together. Whatever this is, it's too fragile. Too real. And I'm not strong enough for it. For a long time, neither of us moved. Finally, she whispered, "You changed my life. You made me remember what it feels like to be seen. Don't ever think that didn't matter." Her voice broke. But maybe love, real love, means letting someone go before you ruin them. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. That letting go wasn't love, it was fear. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw the same thing. I felt pain, longing, and the unbearable truth that maybe she was right. So I did the only thing I could. I nodded. And then quietly she turned away. That night, as I drove home through the snow, I thought about everything we'd left unsaid. About all the ways love could exist even in silence, even in separation. Maybe what we had wasn't meant to last forever. Maybe it was meant to teach us how to feel again. But deep down, I knew one thing with aching certainty. She had become the most honest part of my story. And no matter where life took us next, a piece of my heart would always stay in that small classroom, with the woman who painted the rain. Winter left as quietly as it came. The snow melted, the students grew restless, and Jefferson High filled again with the sound of laughter and possibility. But she was gone. Elena left for Vermont in February, just before spring. She didn't say goodbye in person, only left a small envelope on my desk, tucked beneath a stack of graded essays. Inside was a postcard, a watercolor painting of two figures standing under an umbrella, the same image she'd painted months ago, only this time the rain had stopped. On the back, her handwriting, "Some goodbyes aren't endings. They're just pauses until we're ready to begin again. Take care of your heart, Anna. You taught me how to listen to mine." No signature. No return address. Just like that, she was gone. The months that followed were quiet. I kept teaching, kept smiling, kept pretending that everything was fine. But every time it rained, I found myself standing by the window, watching the drops slide down the glass like unsent words. It wasn't grief I felt, not exactly. It was the echo of something unfinished. Sometimes I caught myself almost calling her name in the hallway, as if she might still turn the corner, paint-stained hands and that gentle smile waiting for me. But she never did. Life, as it always does, moved on. By summer, I had begun to breathe again. I took long walks, read books I'd abandoned years ago, and even started painting small, clumsy attempts inspired by her. It wasn't art, not really. It was therapy. And maybe that's what love leaves behind when it can't stay: the courage to create, to rebuild, to keep feeling even when it hurts. I thought about visiting her. I even looked up flights once, hovering over the confirm button for almost an hour. But I didn't go. Some part of me believed that if fate wanted us to meet again, it would. That meeting came 2 years later. It was a late September morning in New York City. I had just arrived for a district teachers' conference, the kind of exhausting, coffee-fueled event filled with polite smiles and endless PowerPoint slides. The hotel lobby buzzed with educators from across the country, and I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when I saw a familiar name on the speaker schedule. Keynote: The Healing Power of Art in Education, Elena Moore, Vermont School of Arts. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My fingers tightened around the paper until it crumpled. She was here. The conference hall was large, but when she walked onto the stage, it felt like the world had narrowed to just her. Her hair was shorter now, neater. She wore a simple navy dress, and there was a calm confidence in her voice I'd never heard before. She spoke about how art helps students heal, how creativity allows children and adults to process pain they can't put into words. But what struck me most wasn't what she said. It was the way she said it, like every word carried the weight of someone who had lived it. Someone who had lost and learned and grown. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. And even though I tried to stay invisible among the crowd, she found me. Her eyes met mine from across the room, and for one suspended moment, the years fell away. The noise faded. The people vanished. Just her, the woman who had once painted rain into beauty, standing there like a quiet promise kept. After the session, I waited outside the hall, my heart racing in a way I hadn't felt in years. When she finally stepped out, she stopped mid-stride, eyes widening in disbelief. "Anna," she breathed. "Elena." For a second, neither of us moved. Then she smiled, small, uncertain, but real. "You came. I could say the same to you," I said softly. "You're a keynote speaker now. I should have known you'd change the world somehow. She laughed, the sound soft and familiar. I wouldn't go that far. There was a pause, heavy with everything unsaid. Finally she asked, do you have time? Maybe. For coffee. I smiled. Always. We found a small cafe across the street, quiet, full of warm light and the smell of roasted beans. It felt almost poetic, sitting across from her again, like closing a chapter I'd left unfinished. She told me about her mother's recovery, her new job teaching at a community art center, how she'd started a program for children who'd experienced trauma. I listened, watching the way her eyes lit up when she spoke, the same spark I'd fallen for years ago. When she asked about me, I told her the truth. About staying in Oregon, about rediscovering my own strength, about how I'd started painting again. Painting? She repeated, smiling. You don't sound so shocked, I said, laughing. I'm terrible, but it makes me feel free. That's what art's supposed to do, she said gently. Set you free. We fell silent for a moment, both smiling into our cups. Then quietly she said, I missed you. It wasn't dramatic, just honest, a truth laid bare between sips of coffee. I looked up, meeting her gaze. I missed you too. There's something extraordinary about seeing someone again after years apart, the way memories and reality collide, how your heart tries to reconcile who they were with who they've become. She wasn't the same woman I'd known, and neither was I. But somehow that made it even more beautiful. We spent hours talking about art, love, healing, everything we'd learned the hard way. And as the afternoon sun faded into golden dusk, I realized something I hadn't before. Love doesn't always return in the way you left it. Sometimes it comes back gentler, quieter, ready. That evening, as we walked back toward the hotel, the city lights flickering around us, Elena stopped suddenly. Do you ever think about it? She asked. About what? Us. Back then. I smiled sadly. All the time. She looked down at her hands. I used to wonder if I made a mistake leaving. You didn't, I said softly. We weren't ready. We were still learning how to love ourselves. She nodded slowly, tears glinting in her eyes. Maybe. But you were the first person who ever saw me without expecting me to be someone else. And you, I whispered, were the first person who reminded me that love could be kind. For a long moment we just stood there, two people who had once been lost, finally finding peace in what they'd become. The next morning, before we went our separate ways, she handed me a small sketchbook. I started this after Vermont, she said. Every time I painted something that reminded me of you, I added it here. I flipped it open, pages filled with colors and shapes, each one a quiet reflection of something we'd shared. A garden bench under sunlight, a classroom window with falling rain, two coffee mugs side by side. At the very end was a simple drawing, two women standing beneath clear skies, holding an umbrella closed between them. Beneath it she'd written, not the end, just the next beginning. When I looked up, she was smiling through tears. I don't know what happens next, she said softly, but I'd like to find out together if you'd let me. I took a deep breath, the kind that fills every empty corner of your chest. You already know my answer. We didn't rush. There were no dramatic reunions, no declarations of forever. Just slow mornings, shared letters, phone calls that stretched past midnight, and visits that became longer each time. Our connection grew differently this time, not out of loneliness but peace. She taught me how to mix colors. I taught her how to find poetry in the quiet moments. Sometimes we'd paint together in silence, her brush dancing across the canvas while I wrote in the corner of the page. One day, she painted us again, not standing in the rain this time, but sitting side by side under a tree in full bloom. You notice, she said, tilting her head. It's still the same two people. But the sky's clear now, I replied. Exactly. Years later, when people asked how we met, we never told the full story. We just said we worked at the same school once, that art met words, and somehow both learned to heal. But sometimes, on quiet evenings when the world outside grew soft and still, she'd glance at me with that same knowing smile and whisper, "You were my mirror." And I'd answer, "You were my light." Because in the end, that's what love really is, not the fireworks, not the fairy tale endings, but the quiet courage to find beauty again after the rain. The last painting she ever made of us hangs in our living room now. It's simple. Two women walking hand in hand through a field of golden grass, sunlight spilling over their shoulders. No titles, no signatures. Just color, warmth, and peace. Every morning as I pass it on my way to work, I pause and smile. Because once, a woman with paint-stained hands taught me that even failed beginnings can bloom into beautiful endings. And somehow she was right. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.